The old family house was filled with the smell of aged wood and memories that seemed to whisper from the walls. The grandfather clock ticked away slowly, as if it were watching the scene unfold. The siblings gathered around the large table in the living room, the very same place where so many family meals had been shared. But this time, there was no laughter, only a silence heavy with anticipation. The lawyer adjusted his glasses before opening the folder full of documents. His voice was steady, but the tension in the room seemed to muffle every word. It was the reading of the will that would decide the fate of the inheritance left by their parents. For each sibling, it was about more than just material possessions. It was about memories, past hurts, and unspoken comparisons. None of this was going to be just about money. The oldest sister, who had cared for their parents until their last days, stared intently at the papers. Her eyes showed both weariness and a hint of indignation. For her, more than fairness, this division represented recognition for years of quiet dedication. Her fingers drummed softly on the wooden table, as if trying to contain her anxiety. The middle brother, saddled with debt and an unstable financial life, took a deep breath with every sentence the lawyer read. He saw this inheritance as a chance for a fresh start, a relief from the weight he carried. His eyes shone more with the hope of paying off bills than with sentimental memories. For him, this moment was about survival. The youngest brother, the successful businessman, seemed detached from the other's nervousness. He wore an impeccable shirt, and his upright posture revealed his self-assurance. But behind his controlled expression, he carried the weight of having to prove himself, to show them that he wasn't just the lucky son. He was there to show them something different. The lawyer continued calmly, listing properties, land, and bank accounts. Each word fell like a stone in the already tense atmosphere. The siblings' eyes met, flashing with disbelief and calculation, silently measuring what this would mean for their lives. The division seemed straightforward on paper, but in their hearts, it was a wound about to be reopened. A cold draft came through the slightly open window, making the curtains sway gently. It felt as if the house itself was reacting to this meeting, a silent witness to so many family moments. Those walls held memories, but now they were part of a negotiation. The living room table, which had once been the setting for festive meals, was now a silent battlefield. Every glance exchanged between the brothers and sister was a preparation for what was to come. The tension wasn't just in the document, but in the past that each line brought back to the surface. When the lawyer finished the initial reading, a thick silence hung in the room. It was a clear sign that something bigger was about to happen. None of the siblings wanted to be the first to speak, but they all knew the night wouldn't end without some revelations.
The inheritance wasn't just a collection of assets. It was a distorted mirror of their family relationships. And in that reflection, each sibling saw their own wounds, resentments, and hopes. The will had been read, but the real battle was only beginning. And before we go on, if you also believe that inheritance isn't just about dividing property, but also feelings, subscribe to the channel right now. Here you'll find real stories that touch the heart and make us reflect on family life. After a few minutes of silence, the youngest brother cleared his throat and broke the tension. His tone was calm but firm, grabbing everyone's attention. He looked at the lawyer and then at his siblings with a slight restrained smile. The words that were about to come out of his mouth would change the course of the meeting. "I want to make something clear right from the start," he said with confidence. "I don't intend to keep the full share that's owed to me. I believe you all needed more than I do, so I'm giving up part of my inheritance." His words landed like a rock thrown into still water. The oldest sister raised her eyebrows in shock, while the brother in debt shifted uncomfortably in his chair, trying to process what he'd just heard. The lawyer simply adjusted his glasses, maintaining a professional neutrality. For a few seconds, no one knew how to react. The oldest sister crossed her arms, her expression closed off. To her, this wasn't generosity. It was a performance. She knew her brother well and understood his need to be seen as the good son. She couldn't believe his motives were selfless. The indebted brother, on the other hand, felt humiliated. To him, the gesture felt like another way of rubbing his inferior position in his face. It was as if the wealthy brother was saying, "I have so much that I can afford to give some away, while you have to beg." His generosity came across as an insult. The silence was broken by the older sister's bitter laugh. She shook her head and made a sarcastic remark. "You've always had to show you're different, haven't you? Even now, after our parents are gone, you still have to be the center of attention." The lawyer tried to intervene, but the siblings' emotional reactions overpowered any sense of formality. A mood of distrust spread quickly. What was meant to sound like kindness had instead become fuel for old resentments. The wealthy brother remained calm, but he felt the weight of their stares. He wanted to prove that his decision was sincere, but he could already tell his family wouldn't see it that way. His intentions, however good, were trapped by their judgments of the past.
His words still hung in the air, mixed with the feeling that something irreversible had begun. The surprising gesture hadn't brought unity, but had instead opened a deeper wound. And that meeting, which was supposed to be about dividing assets, had now become a dispute over truths and intentions. What had started as a choice born of generosity was turning into a silent battle, not over the money itself, but over the power to define who was truly fair, kind, and deserving within that family. The silence following the announcement felt heavier than any word spoken. The oldest sister, still with her arms crossed, leaned forward and fixed her eyes on the wealthy brother. Her voice came out steady, loaded with resentment. "Do you think you can buy our gratitude with this little performance?" The indebted brother clenched his fists under the table, trying to contain his anger. To him, this wasn't generosity, it was humiliation. He felt diminished in the face of the youngest brother's apparent superiority, who seemed determined to cast himself as the benevolent one. His wounded pride was greater than any gratitude for an extra share he might receive. The others exchanged suspicious glances. The atmosphere grew thicker, as if the walls of the house were absorbing the tension. The lawyer tried to maintain a professional posture, but could see the meeting was slipping out of control. The wealthy brother took a deep breath before answering. His tone was controlled, but there was a hint of frustration in his voice. "I'm not trying to buy anyone. I just want to help, because I know you need it more than I do. What's wrong with that?" His words, instead of calming things down, only fueled more distrust. The oldest sister slammed her hand on the table, making the papers shake. "What's wrong is that you've always needed to show you're better than us. Always Dad's favorite, always the golden example, and now you want to keep playing the role of the savior." The indebted brother agreed with a nod, his expression bitter. "You don't understand what it's like to live with debt, to be hounded every day, to feel the weight of bankruptcy looming. And now you show up with this speech about generosity, as if you're doing us a favor." The wealthy brother looked down for a moment, feeling the impact of the accusations. Deep down, a part of him feared there was truth in their words. Was his generosity just a reflection of disguised pride? The doubt began to creep into his thoughts. The lawyer tried to intervene, raising a hand to restore order. "Everyone, please, the purpose of this meeting is to settle the division fairly. We need to stay calm to proceed." But calm seemed like an unattainable luxury. The inheritance was no longer just about material goods. It had become a stage where old grudges resurfaced with force, and every word exchanged seemed to dig the chasm between the siblings even deeper. As the argument continued,
Old memories began to surface, fueled by pent-up anger. The oldest sister was the first to bring up the past. Who was by Mom's side when she got sick? Who stayed up all night taking care of Dad? It certainly wasn't you, who was always busy with your business trips. The wealthy brother looked up, his voice thick with a mix of defense and regret. I helped in other ways. I paid for the best doctors. I sent money whenever it was needed. Just because I wasn't there in person doesn't mean I didn't care. Money doesn't keep you company, and it doesn't hold someone's hand in the hospital. She shot back, her eyes glistening. Her voice trembled, revealing not just anger, but the pain of years of dedication going unrecognized. The brother in debt seized the moment to reinforce his own resentment. You always had privileges we never got. You went to the best schools. You started your company with Dad's help. And now you want to play the generous one? That doesn't erase all the years we were left behind. The words cut like knives into the wealthy brother's conscience. He did remember his father's support, the constant encouragement, while the others had faced tougher paths. It made him wonder if he was now repeating the same pattern, trying to place himself above his siblings. The lawyer, visibly uncomfortable, asked for a pause so everyone could catch their breath. But no one wanted to stop. The past was being reopened like a wound that had never properly healed. The will was just the trigger for revelations that had been bottled up for years. Voices rose, and the room that had once been the setting for family celebrations now echoed with accusations and painful memories. The smell of cold coffee and the old portraits on the walls seemed to witness the collapse of the siblings' bond. The wealthy brother, silent for a moment, took in every detail around him. The house they had grown up in now felt foreign, as if it had lost its very soul. He wondered if there was any room left for reconciliation, or if the tie between them was already broken beyond repair. When the oldest sister stood up and declared that she wouldn't accept charity disguised as kindness, the tension reached a new high. The gesture that was meant to unite had just ignited the fire of old grievances. And in that moment, everyone understood that dividing the inheritance wouldn't just be a legal matter, but a war of memories, guilt, and resentments held onto for a lifetime. The room was charged with tension. Every word spoken seemed to ignite a new spark. The oldest sister, still standing, stared at the wealthy brother with a hard expression. You've never done anything without expecting praise. Even your generosity has to be seen by everyone just to feed your inflated ego.
The indebted brother slammed his hand on the table, unable to contain his fury. Exactly. You want to act like a saint, but deep down you're just trying to ease your own conscience. You're not thinking about us. You're thinking about how you'll be remembered. The wealthy brother took a deep breath, trying to stay calm, but the accusation hit him hard. You're twisting everything. I don't want to be remembered for this. I just don't think it's fair for me to take so much when you needed more. What is so wrong about that? The oldest sister let out a bitter, almost sarcastic laugh. What's wrong is that you've never been equal to us. You've always been a step above. You've always had everything handed to you. And now you come with this speech about humility? You're not fooling anyone. The lawyer cleared his throat, trying to restore some formality to the meeting, but the raised voices had already taken over the room. Everyone, please, I must ask that we resume this calmly. The purpose here is to resolve the division in a civilized manner. But civility was the last thing present in that room. The indebted brother leaned forward, his gaze fiery. If you really want to help, keep your share and give it to me in cash. That would actually be useful. But giving it up just to look like the good guy does nothing for me. The wealthy brother closed his eyes for a moment, absorbing the weight of the words. He knew any justification would only increase their distrust. He was trapped between his desire to be fair and the impossibility of proving his intentions. The oldest sister walked over to the window, looking out as if searching for strength in the darkness of the night. Our father may have left this inheritance, but he also left a wound that never closed, and you are a reflection of that. The accusations echoed through the room like remnants of an unresolved past. The gesture meant to represent generosity had become a catalyst for resentment, and every word spoken seemed to push the chance of reconciliation further away. The lawyer cleared his throat, trying to restore some formality to the meeting, but the raised voices had already taken over the room. "Everyone, please. I must ask that we resume this calmly. The purpose here is to resolve the division in a civilized manner." But civility was the last thing present in that room. The oldest sister sat down again, still rigid, as if forcing herself to comply. "Fine. If we're to speak calmly, I'll be clear. I believe I deserve a larger share. I was by our parents' side until the end, while others just sent money." The indebted brother seized the opportunity. "I agree. She deserves more, and I also need more. I'm not asking for luxury. I'm asking for survival. If the split is equal, I'll be condemned to keep drowning in debt."
The wealthy brother took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the pressure building. "I'm not opposed to you both getting more, but please understand that I'm not doing this to make myself look good. I just want everyone to have what they need." The oldest sister narrowed her eyes, as if analyzing every syllable. "Pretty words, but you know as well as I do that gestures like this always come with hidden expectations. Are you going to want us to be grateful to you forever?" The lawyer intervened, trying to introduce objectivity. "We can consider adjustments to the division, but it needs to be documented clearly, with no room for misinterpretation. I suggest we establish the criteria before discussing specific amounts." Despite the attempt at rationality, emotions were still running high. The indebted brother rested his head in his hands, his heavy breathing betraying his exhaustion. "I just want a chance to start over, but I will never accept being treated like someone who depends on the kindness of others." The wealthy brother realized that any move he made could be interpreted as arrogance or manipulation. His silence, for a moment, was more eloquent than any words. The lawyer ended the round of discussion with a sigh. "We need to move forward, but there's no denying it. This inheritance is exposing wounds that go much deeper than material possessions, and unfortunately, no legal document can heal that." The lawyer, while reviewing some additional documents, cleared his throat before speaking. His firm voice cut through the siblings' murmuring. "There is one more point that needs to be clarified. It states here that during his lifetime, your father made a substantial financial gift to his youngest son a few years ago." The revelation landed like a silent thunderclap. The indebted brother immediately lifted his head, his eyes wide with indignation. "A gift? What does that mean? So on top of always having more opportunities, you got an early inheritance present?" The oldest sister leaned forward, her expression hardening even further. "Pretty words, but you know as well as I do that gestures like this always come with hidden expectations. Are you going to want us to be grateful to you forever?" The wealthy brother felt the ground shake beneath his feet. "Yes, it's true. Dad helped me when I decided to start my company, but that was a loan, not a gift. I paid him back through gratitude and hard work." The oldest sister's voice echoed with sarcasm. "Paid him back. You can tell yourself that, but to us it looks like you were always the favorite. And now, to clean up your image, you're playing the generous one." The lawyer tried to provide context.
The document doesn't specify if it was a loan or a gift, but it is recorded as an asset transfer.
The words only added fuel to the fire of their distrust. The indebted brother suddenly stood up, pacing back and forth like a caged animal. So that's it. He's already had a share, and now he wants to play the hero by giving up a few crumbs. The wealthy brother tried to respond, but his voice failed him for a moment. For the first time, he felt that no argument could change his sibling's perception. The weight of the past had become a chain that bound him, and his initial intention to help seemed increasingly distorted. The silence that followed brought no relief, only the feeling that the division of the inheritance had just entered even more dangerous territory. The past, revealed so starkly, was fueling present resentment and threatening any remaining possibility of understanding. After the revelation, the oldest sister and the indebted brother exchanged a look. For the first time that night, something united them, their anger toward the wealthy brother. No words were needed to seal their alliance. The shared silence and the weight of the accusations were enough. "He's already had more than all of us," the sister said firmly. "It's not fair for him to keep dictating how things should be divided. It's clear now that his generosity is just a facade." The indebted brother agreed vehemently. If he really wanted to be fair, he should renounce the inheritance entirely. That's the only way he could prove he's not trying to buy our approval. The wealthy brother, isolated, felt cornered by stares that now saw him not as an ally, but as an adversary. "You're being unfair. I never asked for favoritism, and I didn't choose to receive that help. I just worked with what I was given." His words sounded hollow to the others. To them, the story seemed far too convenient, as if the youngest brother was just trying to justify an undeniable privilege. The uncomfortable lawyer took notes on every comment, foreseeing that this process would be longer and more complex than he had initially imagined. The oldest sister crossed her arms, her voice laden with bitterness. "This isn't just about money. It's about all the years you were treated as special, while we handled responsibilities you never had to face." The indebted brother moved closer to his sister, as if sealing an invisible pact. For the first time in a long time, they were on the same side. Their shared resentment created a fragile alliance against their younger brother. The wealthy brother looked at the two of them and felt the heavy weight of loneliness. It was as if he had become a foreigner in his own family. He tried to control his breathing, but inside, he was struggling with the feeling that he was losing not just the inheritance, but the bond that had once held them together. The house, a silent witness, seemed to hum with the hostility in the air. The charged atmosphere made it clear that from that point on, every word would be used as a weapon. The alliance that had formed wasn't built on love, but on resentment, and that made it even more dangerous. The lawyer closed the documents for a moment, taking a deep breath. "It's clear we won't reach any consensus today. I suggest we adjourn the meeting and resume at another time." But deep down, everyone knew there was no break long enough to undo the new division that had formed in that room. Not the division of assets, but the division of sides. That night, after the meeting, the wealthy brother remained alone in the living room for a while. The lawyer had left, and the other siblings had departed from the house in a heavy silence, carrying with them the anger that now united them. The empty house seemed to echo the accusations that had been thrown at him. He sat in his father's armchair, staring intently at the family portrait hanging on the wall. Memories of his childhood came in flashes, his father encouraging him in his studies, his mother smiling with pride, his siblings playing in the backyard. It all felt so distant, as if it belonged to another life. He wondered if at some point he had truly been unfair.
Perhaps his generosity wasn't as pure as he had believed. Was he just trying to place himself above the others, repeating the prominent role that had always been given to him? These thoughts gnawed at him. For the first time, his confidence wavered. The image of the successful man, accustomed to being admired, was now replaced by that of someone accused, isolated, and rejected by his own family. As he reflected, he listened to the sound of the wind whistling through the windows of the old house. The cold spreading through the room seemed to seep into his heart as well. He felt like a foreigner in the place where he had grown up. He picked up a glass of water, but his hands were shaking. The pressure of expectations and the guilt over his siblings' distrust weighed heavier than any fortune he had ever accumulated. The silence of the house forced him to confront his own demons. No matter how he tried to justify his intentions, he knew he would never have control over how his siblings interpreted his actions. And perhaps that was the burden he would have to carry, the impossibility of proving that his kindness was sincere. The wealthy brother closed his eyes for a moment, breathing deeply, like someone searching for strength for the next battle. The war over the inheritance was far from over, but the war within himself had already begun. And in that moment, he realized his greatest enemy wasn't his siblings' distrust, but the growing doubt consuming him from the inside.
Days later, the family gathered again to try to move forward with dividing the inheritance. The lawyer, aware of the tension, tried to keep the meeting objective, focused solely on numbers and documents. But inevitably, every asset listed stirred up painful emotions and memories. The first dispute was over the family home. The oldest sister wanted to keep it as a memory of their parents, while the indebted brother argued for an immediate sale to pay off his debts. The wealthy brother remained silent, watching the conflict intensify. When the lawyer suggested selling the house and splitting the money, the oldest sister slammed her hand on the table. "I won't allow you to erase our family's history for money. This house holds everything we lived through." The indebted brother replied with a voice full of frustration. "Memories don't pay creditors, and they don't put food on the table. You can afford to romanticize things, but I can't. I need that money to survive." The wealthy brother intervened cautiously. "What if I bought out your shares? That way, the house would stay in the family, but you'd still get the money you need." His words instantly reignited their suspicion. The oldest sister narrowed her eyes. "You always have to be the one to solve everything, don't you? Even when you're trying to help, it feels like you're controlling it all." The indebted brother grew irritated also. "Of course, you want to keep the house to be remembered as the son who preserved our parents' memory. Everything with you as a hidden purpose." The lawyer tried to mediate, but the voices talking over each other turned the negotiation into a storm of accusations. Every suggestion from the wealthy brother was met with suspicion of manipulation, and every refusal from the others seemed to reinforce the idea of ingratitude. Amid the chaos, the possessions left by their parents were no longer seen as assets, but as weapons in an emotional battle. What was at stake wasn't just who would get what, but who would have the final say in the family's history. And with each new argument, the distance between them grew more irreversible. The meeting dragged on late into the night, and the atmosphere was as heavy as a storm about to break. The lawyer had given up trying to maintain order. The siblings, fueled by resentment, turned their full attention to the youngest brother. The oldest sister was the first to attack. "Enough with the runaround. We want the truth. Why are you so insistent on giving up your inheritance? What are you hiding?" The indebted brother, his eyes flashing, added, "You want to play the saint, but everything points to something else. You got help while they were alive, you had privileges from the start, and now you show up as the savior. To me, that's manipulation." Under pressure, the wealthy brother felt his chest tighten. He tried to stay calm, but their voices surrounded him like sharp blades. "I've already said it. I want nothing but fairness. I know you need it more than I do." The oldest sister slammed her hand hard on the table, making the papers jump. "Fairness? Don't talk to us about fairness when you've always had everything. Fairness would be you renouncing it completely, leaving this inheritance for those who actually struggled." The silence that followed was suffocating. The wealthy brother felt the weight of the words like stones falling on him. Inside, he fought the feeling of being trapped in an inescapable emotional snare. The indebted brother stepped closer to him, his voice thick with bitterness. "Admit it. You need us to see you as the good one. You need our approval because deep down, you were never truly loved the way you think you were." Those words struck a deep chord, far beyond the inheritance. For the first time, the wealthy brother couldn't respond. He stood motionless, staring at them, the silence betraying his vulnerability. The direct confrontation didn't bring clarity, but it exposed hidden wounds. What was once a dispute over assets now revealed itself as a struggle for recognition, love, and validation within the family. And in that moment, they all realized that what was at stake was greater than any inheritance. It was each person's value within their shared story. Sitting with his hands flat on the table, the wealthy brother finally looked up. His voice, once firm, was now thick with emotion. "You're partly right. I've always wanted to be seen. I've always wanted to prove that I deserved everything I received. Maybe my decision to give up part of the inheritance was also to make myself feel better." The confession took everyone by surprise. The oldest sister fell silent for a moment. The indebted brother, even in his disbelief, seemed to hesitate. It was rare to see the youngest stripped of his mask of self-assurance. He continued, his voice trembling. "I tried to help, but I see now that I was also seeking approval. I wanted you to recognize that I'm not just the privileged one in the family. I wanted to show that I could be different." Tears welled up in the oldest sister's eyes, though she tried to hide them. Her brother's words touched on wounds she herself carried, the feeling of being unseen, of not being valued for all she had done for her parents. The indebted brother sighed, running his hands over his face. "So that's it. It was always about you, not about us. Your generosity wasn't false, but it was never fully true either."
The wealthy brother nodded, accepting the accusation like an unavoidable burden. "Maybe you're right. But even with all my flaws, what I want is peace. I want us to be able to end this without destroying what little still connects us." The silence that followed was different from the others. There were no shouts or accusations, just the weight of the truth spoken aloud. The confession didn't erase the past, but it humanized the youngest brother in the eyes of the others. The oldest sister discreetly wiped away a tear, but kept her composure firm. "This doesn't change what happened, but at least now we know who you really are." The painful confession didn't immediately bring forgiveness, but it opened the door to a new understanding. For the first time, the siblings saw the youngest not as a rival, but as someone equally marked by the family's scars. The tension still hung in the air, but the tone had shifted after the confession. The wealthy brother took a deep breath, looking at his siblings with a firm, though weary gaze. "If my presence here only brings more resentment, then so be it. I will give up an even larger share of the inheritance. Keep it." The lawyer's eyes widened in surprise. "Are you sure about this? We're talking about a significant amount of money." The wealthy brother nodded without hesitation. "I am. Not because I want to look better or because I want applause, but because I know that no matter what, I will never be able to change what you think of me. At least this way, I can end this cycle of arguing." The oldest sister stood up slowly, shocked by the decision. "You didn't have to go this far. "Yes, I did," he replied, his voice calm, almost resigned. "Because this inheritance isn't just about money. It's about everything that has come between us. If giving it up is the price to end this war, then I'm willing to pay it." The indebted brother leaned back in his chair, caught between anger and guilt. He didn't know whether to be thankful or feel insulted. The youngest brother's gesture seemed, once again, like a mixture of kindness and burden. The lawyer made the necessary notes, ensuring the decision would be made official. The atmosphere grew heavy, but in a different way, not with hostility, but with exhaustion. The wealthy brother knew he wouldn't win his siblings' trust with his decision, but deep down, he felt he had finally made the choice that would bring him some peace of mind. It was a bitter sacrifice, but also a liberation. With the new decision recorded, the siblings began to discuss the remaining division. The lawyer guided each step, but the mood was cold. There were no more shouts, just a tense silence, punctuated by short, matter-of-fact words. The oldest sister claimed the family home, citing its sentimental value. The indebted brother insisted on receiving a larger cash portion to settle his debts. The wealthy brother, true to his renunciation, simply agreed to the terms without raising any objections. The lawyer formalized the agreement, but made it clear that the division wouldn't erase the resentments. The assets are officially shared, but it's evident that this family still has much more to resolve beyond the paperwork. The siblings signed the documents one by one. The sound of pens scratching the paper cut through the silence, a reminder of the distance between them. No smiles, no words of comfort, just bureaucracy and lingering hurt hanging in the air. The oldest sister avoided making eye contact with the youngest. The indebted brother, though relieved by the solution, couldn't shake a bitter taste. It was as if the victory came with an invisible defeat. The wealthy brother remained silent throughout the entire process. He felt that any word could reopen wounds, and he preferred to carry the weight of his choice alone. When the meeting ended, they each stood up slowly. There were no hugs, no warm goodbyes, just a cold, almost procedural nod. The inheritance was divided, but the family remained broken. The agreement was just a fragile patch on fabric that was already worn thin. And deep down, they all knew it would only take one detail from the past to emerge for the wound to start bleeding again. The house, now empty, seemed to breathe on its own, as if it had witnessed the end of an era. The old furniture remained in place, but the air carried a different silence, the silence of estrangement. Each sibling had left in opposite directions, taking with them more than just assets. They carried grievances, memories, and unspoken words. The wealthy brother stayed a few minutes longer, walking slowly through the rooms. Every object brought back memories of his childhood, when their unity felt natural and their differences hadn't yet turned into wounds. He touched the frame of an old portrait and wondered if that bond could ever be restored. Outside, the wind blew strongly, swaying the trees in the backyard. It was as if nature itself was mourning what the family had lost. The wealthy brother closed his eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath, trying to absorb the peace he couldn't find among his own. He knew that, to his siblings, he would always be the privileged one, the favored son, the one who was too generous to be sincere. But within himself, there was a new clarity. Their judgment no longer mattered. His renunciation hadn't changed his family's view of him, but it had given him a rare sense of relief. Back in her own home, the oldest sister cried alone as she remembered the nights she had spent caring for their parents. Despite her anger, she felt a pang of regret for not being able to acknowledge her younger brother's vulnerability. As for the indebted brother, though relieved to have paid off some of his debts, He was left with the feeling of being emotionally indebted to everyone. The agreement had ended the material dispute, but it hadn't resolved the emotional emptiness. The inheritance had left deep marks that time might not be able to erase. Each sibling would now go their separate way, but they would all carry the scars from what had happened in that room. As he walked out the front door, the wealthy brother looked back one last time. The house seemed to watch him in silence, as if holding on to all the unspoken stories and words that would never be said. He closed the door slowly, with the feeling that he wasn't just saying goodbye to the house, but also to the idea of a united family. The final silence weighed heavier than any inheritance. And deep down, they all knew the real division wasn't of the assets, but of the bonds that had once held them together.
This is another story that shows how money can divide, but the emotional wounds are what truly remain. If this moved you, or if you found yourself in a similar situation, don't leave without subscribing to the channel right now. Join this community of family stories that reveal the pain, the conflicts, and also the lessons life teaches us. Hit that subscribe button and come along with us because we still have so many more stories to tell.